Welcome to the Paddle Like a Girl podcast. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Paddle Like a Girl podcast. Today we have Kristy Cook. Christy is the founder of Accessible Adventures, a platform dedicated to promoting accessible travel and outdoor experiences for families with special needs. As a mother of 4, including her son Robbie, who has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, a rare form of epilepsy, Christy and her husband TJ have made it their mission to explore wheelchair-friendly destinations and share their insights with others. Through their website and social media channels, they provide resources, adaptive gear recommendations, and guidance on accessible travel, inspiring families to embrace adventure regardless of physical limitations. Welcome, Christy.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be chatting with you. As we were kind of mentioning this before we hit record, that I've been following you for some time, and so it's kind of weird to actually be chatting with you.
I feel like it always feels that way. Like, you know someone so well. Like, we've watched your story and your journey with Hudson, and I'm like, I know him.
I know
what your life is like. So it's ironically not strange for me when I jump on with different people, because I'm like, yeah, we've been friends, even though we've been on a call.
That's totally how it feels. It's like I feel like I know you, even though we've never actually spoken. So this is really cool and exciting. I feel like there's so many things that we can chat about. I won't keep you for too long today because I feel like we can chat probably for a really long time. But I do obviously want to talk about your journey with Robbie, and then of course all your outdoor adventures and kind of how you got into it. So I would like to start with just kind of getting a better understanding of Robbie's diagnosis, how you got a diagnosis, and how it affects his development.
Absolutely. So Robbie is 10 years old and he has LGS, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And with LGS, sometimes it's diagnosed with genetics. Robbie was diagnosed much later than most children are. We did a ton of genetic testing. We actually went to the Undiagnosed Disease Network. Nothing came back significantly that was explaining why Robbie has the type of seizures he has and his global developmental delays. There's kind of a toss-up between his specialists on, do we think that the delays are from something genetic or something he was born with, or just because of the massive amount of seizures that he has. That's kind of more where I stand. I feel like when your background activity is so crazy like it is with LGS, so what LGS is a syndrome. So not everyone with LGS has it for the same reasons. Sometimes it can be from brain damage at birth. Robbie didn't have that. It can also be from genetic conditions, which Robbie doesn't have either. That's kind of why the delay in his diagnosis of them looking to kind of make sure it wasn't something else specifically. But what is in common with all kids with LGS is that they have uncontrolled seizures or very hard to control refractory seizures, meaning their epilepsy does not respond well to medication. He's been on over 10 different drugs, every diet, oil, tincture, anything that you can imagine, including brain surgery Robbie has had. He still averages about 2 to 3 seizures a day.
Wow.
No matter what we're doing, epilepsy packs up with us. Another thing that comes with LGS is a chaotic background activity. A lot of kids with LGS start with infantile spasms, which starts with that hypsmeria, that kind of chaotic electrical storm, so to say, that's in your brain at all times. It makes it very hard to learn, which is why most kids have developmental delays. Some have gross motor delays. A lot of times you see like co-occurring CP. Again, Robbie does have CP. It's very mild and was diagnosed super late in his life. And that's something that we've found is getting more and more common within the community. You have these kids that are undiagnosed for so long, and then they're like, well, this is kind of your syndrome that you fit into based off of all these categories, right? And that community is growing, and we found so many families that are similar to ours and support in that.
So when you say that he was diagnosed late, how old was he when he got a diagnosis?
So some of this is because of the medical care that we received where we were versus where we are now. We moved from Florida. We were in Florida, and the medical care is not as good there as it is in Colorado. We actually moved to have better medical care for Robbie. And when we got here, some of these diagnoses should have been placed years before. So if Robbie is 10, he was probably 8 when he was diagnosed with LGS.
Wow.
And it was actually a conversation where we share online. And people kept saying, does your son have LGS? Because he has these seizures and like I can tell he has these delays. And I was like, no, I've never been told that. So I went to our neurologist and I asked, and she goes, well, yeah. No one told you that? And she was like, I just want to be clear. Like, LGS is a syndrome, right? It's not like you've been looking for a diagnosis for so long. It's not like a genetic diagnosis, something that is the reason that explains it all. It's more like all of these pieces put together and we can kind of categorize it this way. And I was like, yeah, I totally understand, but there's community in diagnosis and resources in diagnosis, and we've never received that. So coming here so late in life, I think most of his team assumed that he had these diagnoses. It's the same thing with his CP diagnosis when we went to a rehab doctor and I kept saying, well, we didn't check his hips every year because he doesn't have CP. And she was like, you keep saying he doesn't have CP, but he does. I was, what? What do you mean? And she was like, yeah, he does. I mean, he has a more mild form of it, but he has weakness on one side and limited mobility because of it and all of these things.
That's so wild.
Yeah, I would definitely classify him that way. So I think finding the right care and specialist is so important. And sometimes looking out of your current location and like what you have access to is important in that as well. So much later than all of his new friends that we've made through the community were diagnosed. But here he is, and he's had it the whole time.
Wow. So interesting. And so I'm in Canada, so obviously a bit different when it comes to just medical care in general, but did it cost a lot of money to be going for all these tests, or was there insurance that was covering most of them?
So totally different depending on what stage of his life we were in. So before we had access to Medicaid. So the way that it works in the United States, it depends on what state you live in, on their rules for Medicaid. So when we lived in Florida, he could not qualify or access Medicaid because of parental income. The limits are not high. So even with only one of us working and a family of four, it did not work. So he was on private insurance, and private insurance declined a lot. They wouldn't do the genetic testing. They wouldn't do certain testing. So we actually got a scholarship, so to say, to go with the Undiagnosed Disease Network. It's a research group. They paid for him to get way more extensive genetic testing, to fly out to a different state to see different specialists who still were unable to diagnose him because it's not something genetic. When we moved to Colorado, this state has different rules for Medicaid that waive parental income. So you get access based off of your child's level of disability, not based off parental income, meaning they're not forcing you to stay in poverty to get help. So here, everything is covered. All of his therapy is covered. Every testing that he's need. They actually reran his genetics last year, and it was completely covered. It's like living in a different country depending on what state you live in the US.
Wow.
It's very strange. So that's why we relocated and kind of left everything behind and started over.
And so that was how long ago that you moved?
We actually moved in 2020, at the end of 2020, during COVID.
Wow.
Like the time that no one was moving, we were like, yep, it's time. We saw some opportunities here and specialists, and it was great timing for us because his team in Florida was kind of just like, yeah, this is what it is. And his nutrition wasn't great, and his epilepsy was not as well controlled, and we just weren't getting that kind of help. And we came here, and his team like always has a plan and next steps, and it's just never giving up. And we're all under the understanding that with his type of epilepsy, it's probably not going away. My goal is not seizure freedom. It's more quality of life, and having a team that understands that, like, we need nutrition that gives him the quality of life that he needs and the energy that he needs. And his medication needs to be balanced enough to where we limit as many seizures as we can, but he's not so drugged that he can't enjoy life.
Right.
Because
yeah.
How fun is that? So we found a really great team here that understands that and his want to enjoy and get outdoors and do things and supports it, which has been wonderful.
Amazing. And so are you finding like a balance between nutrition and medication that does help with the seizures? Like I know the ketogenic diet, some people follow that diet to minimize seizures, or is it just medication right now?
So right now it's just medication. He had done the ketogenic diet, and not just the way that if you're doing a ketogenic diet for epilepsy, it's like in a hospital and monitored. You're weighing everything. It's not like diet keto, trending keto, right?
Yeah.
It's very different. So we tried that for a while, but it didn't touch his epilepsy, and he was just sick all the time, just felt awful. And when we moved here, we didn't have access to the type of insurance that we needed when we were in Florida, and they would not cover any different type of formula. So we moved here, and I was like, I really want something different. He has all these rashes, constipation. Like this can't be life. I understand he has to be G-tube fed, but I don't like it. So They gave us a bunch of different things to try, and we're super open to any options that we brought up. And we found something that worked so perfectly, and his skin cleared and all these other issues cleared up, and it just gave him energy versus him looking so sluggish after his feeds. So that was really changing for us, more in a general health than in an epilepsy way. He is on 3 different medications right now for his epilepsy. Wow. That's kind of what it takes to keep him stable. And we've gone through even here where we tried something and we were like, this works great. He's down to 1 seizure every 2 or 3 days, but he was completely zoned all day long and had no quality of life, and his smile was gone. So we talked to his doctor and we were like, this doesn't feel like the right fit. This is, it's taking away his life from him. Like, where is the value in that? So I think that it's almost like work-life balance, right? That seizure control and quality of life balance is so important to be able to actually enjoy life and experience things.
Yeah.
And we've got a nice little balance right now where his seizures aren't terribly intense.
Okay.
So he can kind of pull back from them quickly, even though they're frequent. Yeah. So we're riding that wave until it changes again.
Okay. And so, for example, Wesley, he does have seizures very infrequently. He's pretty much 100% controlled through his medication, thankfully. So when he does have seizures, it's usually because he needs a dose increase, and they usually present in clusters. His last episode, I guess, was he had multiple, and one of them was pretty long. And they're so scary for us because we don't see them very frequently, right? And so seizures are scary, and we know that there's obviously a threshold where it's like, this is okay, and then here we are in a danger zone. What's the point where it's like, okay, we need to call 911 or whatever it may be, we need medical attention with Robbie?
Yeah, so Robbie has different types of seizures. That's something that's really common with LGS as well, having more than one type of seizure. He has atonic drop seizures. Those are pretty quick. So they drop really fast. They can hurt themselves, but they kind of pop up really quickly and then just go on with their day. So something like that, we don't need to treat for. It's very fast. He does have a VNS. It's a vagal nerve stimulator. Basically, we carry around a magnet everywhere we go. And if he does start to go into like a complex partial type of seizure and he's stuck, because he'll basically kind of drop down, have an arm up, and then get stuck. And he struggles to breathe when this happens. If we swipe his VNS, it pulls him out. Wow. It's been very successful. It's not successful for every person or every child at pulling out of seizures. And sometimes it just works on the back end, but for him, we've been really thankful because it has been. We also carry 2 different types of rescue meds, depending on if he has seizures that are worse or if he starts to cluster. So if he starts to cluster and his background activity, like we can tell just by his overall appearance, that's something that is one of the reasons we don't have him going to daycare or nursing, because if you're not with him all the time, you wouldn't tell. Based off of the look in his eyes or how his body is moving, right? That something else is going on. So we have rescue meds that we can administer there. That doesn't always mean calling 911. Sometimes it's shooting the doctor a quick email and being like, hey, just letting you know, this is what happened. I'll update you. But it could be because he's growing. It could be because, when they're younger, they're teething. He could be fighting off some type of stomach bug, and we got to wait 2 days and kind of see what happens. When those things happen, we do bridge meds. So we'll message her and she'll be like, okay, let's go up on his meds for the next 4 days. And then we'll try and pull back and see if that's enough to get him through whatever his body's kind of fighting.
Right.
And if not, then maybe he did grow, right? Just like your son, like he outgrew his meds, or he's been on them too long and they're not as effective. And then we have to start making changes. It's actually rare now that we call 911 for seizures. If anything, if he's clustering and we've given rescue meds, and then he starts to cluster again, I just kind of show up at the ER and I call the doctor ahead of time and I'm like, hey, we need to hook up to an EEG and see what's going on because I've already done what I can. We also, because we travel and we're outdoors a lot, you have to pay attention to your child's baseline. We have canceled whole trips because Robbie's baseline looked funny. We noticed in the week up and coming, he was clustering more often. Things were not what they usually are. So we'll completely back out of something that is not going to be near a hospital, etc. We make sure that he's at his stable line. So I think knowing your kid's typical threshold, their stability is important. Not everyone's is the same. If your son was seizing 3 times a day, you'd be like, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But with my son, I'm like, this is totally handleable. These are the type of seizures that are happening. I can pull him out of these. I have everything I need to stabilize him, even if we're 3 hours away from an emergency room. So we're good.
Yeah. And so, sorry, I have so many questions just like bouncing around in my brain as you talk because it's triggering questions. But so you mentioned that he's not in daycare or school or anything because they're so unpredictable, the seizures, and you just know him, you and TJ know him so well that you can just tell if he's having a bit of an off day and he may have, bad seizures today or whatever it may be. So how do you get any type of assistance? Do you have assistance? Do you get breaks?
So we actually moved to the state that we're in, to Colorado, because we are able to be basically his home health team. In other states, that's not allowed here in the US, where parents cannot be either nursing staff or CNA staff or paid caregivers. So having one income is extremely difficult for a family that has higher medical expenses. Here, my husband is on shift like 12 hours a day, primary caregiver. So it allows him to be able to do that. He's also able to do that while we travel, as long as we're within the US, which is really convenient, because whether we're here or we're 2 states over, Robbie's care looks the same. He still is doing home therapy on the road every day. He's still taking medication. He still needs help with bathing and diapering and all of the things. So that is how we've been able to kind of financially survive. As far as breaks, we don't really have them.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what happens when you move half a country away from your support system.
Yeah.
So my mom might come in town once, twice a year. And even when we're having breaks, like, we're still home. She's just kind of here helping. Mm-hmm. We've gotten very good at communicating with each other, and me giving him breaks and him giving me breaks. Our youngest daughter has level 3 autism. So I am her caregiver, and then we have ABA in and out of the house.
Okay.
So kind of
what is ABA? Sorry, if you don't mind me asking.
It's behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So it can look different for different children. For Taylor, it's mostly working on communication. So she gets dysregulated from a lack of communication. She's nonverbal, but she can process everything in her head. She has apraxia of speech. So essentially in her head, it all makes sense and the sentences are coming together like a typical toddler, but they're not coming out of her mouth, which can cause some serious breakdowns in communication. So we're working on basically those behaviors and seeing them coming and trying to learn coping skills and how to, connect with another person. But she requires 24/7 supervision, just like Robbie does. Mm-hmm. So I have assistance in that way that he does not with her.
Right.
And so I'm able to help him throughout the day, and we can kind of tag team and give each other breaks. But we do have a third person here for at least 20 hours a week, which is super helpful. Now, being in this state, you can have home health nursing. We could say, instead of TJ being on the clock, that we wanted a nurse here half the time to care for Robbie and help with maybe some of the harder tasks. I know a lot of people that have them come for bathing and things like that. It's been our choice not to do that. I think maybe that's just the way that we're wired. I prefer, if we can, while we can, to be his primary source of care, because we know him so well, and because he is nonverbal and he does have this kind of epilepsy that just pops up all throughout the day. Mm-hmm. We're going to catch it sooner. So
yeah. Well, I mean, Robbie just looks like such a happy kid, and he looks like he's doing so well. He's walking, which is new for him. Like, when did he start walking?
He just started this in July. So he is 10 years old and he just started walking, and he just turned 10 in November. So he started right at the end of 9, and we were told from so many doctors so early on, like, he's never going to walk. Mm-hmm. He's never going to crawl. He probably won't sit. He's never going to talk. But I tell people all the time, there is no time limit on growth. So this whole, if they don't do it by the time that they're 4 years old, they're not going to do it. He is. Mm-hmm. And he's walking around, he's learning. So it's not functional yet where we can transition ourselves, but he's definitely getting there, and I have full confidence that he will. It's just a matter of time. I think it takes longer to make connections in his brain because of that seizure activity and that constant kind of chaotic epileptic storm that's going on. It's harder to learn. So he is a very happy dude. I think that makes things so much easier. I've been a medical mom for 10 years. And I've been a medical mom to a very complex but very happy child. Mm-hmm. I will say, now having another neurodivergent child in the house that struggles more with like behavioral things and emotional concerns on a daily basis, that is harder. I feel so much for these parents, because I'm like, wow, I feel like when you see Robbie out in public, you get more grace than when you have a kid with autism that's having a meltdown, which it should be completely the opposite because it's so hard. But for him, we don't need the backup. For her, I was like, I do need a few hours a day where someone comes in and they help us teach her all these skills and you get that break. So I think whatever works for your family and you decide is the way to go. We've made different decisions even based on children in our house and their needs and their responses. Robbie responds the best to us. So that's kind of the way that we keep things. But I think there is no right answer ever when you have complex kids.
No, definitely not. And kind of similar with me, I always say Wesley's the easy child, despite his additional needs. Between him and Hudson, like Hudson is the one who causes me the most stress, but Wesley is too similar. He's just so happy and just, he's along for the ride with us, and he's just a happy little kid, and he seems to bring everyone joy. So, and I feel Robbie is very, very similar. How much of a role do you think his time outside and on your adventures is playing in him just being super happy and joyful?
So much. I mean, we've seen that level of joy increase so much since we've started to really explore outdoors and be outside more often. Looking at a map, Florida is at the very bottom of the United States and it's hot. It's hot and it's humid and it's really hard for kids that can't control their body temperature.
Right.
So it was hard for him to be outside if he wasn't like in our pool. So he loved being in our pool in our backyard, but it was so hard to hike and to do other things. Yeah. Versus here, we're kind of in the middle of the map of the United States. So it's not too cold. It's not too hot. It's kind of the perfect medium where all year long, if you're wearing the right clothes, you can go out. And it's been so life-changing for him because he absolutely loves the outdoors. When he first tried his eye gaze machine at therapy this year, the first thing he said is, I want to go for a ride in the truck with Dad, and I want to go outside. God. And we were like, yep, so we knew it. We knew it. So he absolutely loves just anything that is outside and full of adventure. He doesn't have that typical fear that I think that you see in kids when they're like, I've never done this before. He's just kind of always down to ride, always down to try new things, shows up everywhere with a smile. That's why people are like, well, but don't you need a break? And I'm like, not from him. Right. I understand like parenthood. Yeah, you do need a break sometimes. But you do have certain kids. And I think that some of these kids with medical complexities, they just come with these amazing angel personalities. Yeah. He's the one that I can hang out with all day long. I'll easily take him on date night. Yeah. He's cool to be around. He's a cool cat. So it's been really easy for him to adapt and, live on the road and be outside and trying new things.
Yeah. So at what point was it that you decided that you wanted to apply for the RV? In comparison to when you started kind of adventuring? Did the adventures come first, or was the RV what triggered that for you?
Yeah, so I think the RV is really what triggered a change in lifestyle. We moved to Colorado in 2020, and when we met our new neurologist, we were talking to her and Make-A-Wish came up, and she was like, absolutely. With Robbie's daily seizures, his risk for SUDEP increases substantially. So SUDEP is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. It can happen in their sleep. It happens for essentially no reason at all. A seizure is always at risk of taking your loved one from you. So he qualified for Make-A-Wish, and because we moved in the midst of COVID, we were like, we can't go to a hotel anymore. We can't be around people. We can't just go to a pool. This is the way we've always vacationed in Florida. We've rented Airbnbs or pools or whatever. Like, I don't know kind of how to get him outside and what to do. We were not a super outdoorsy family other than like the beach and fishing on a boat. It's kind of Florida lifestyle, right? So we didn't own hiking shoes. Never been camping. We'd never done anything like this. But we thought it would be such a great way to explore and stay outdoors and social distance from people. And she was more than on board. She thought it was like the most amazing idea. So we contacted Make-A-Wish through her. She referred him, and they were like, absolutely, I think this is going to be great. Everyone told us to plan our first trip close to home. Find somewhere within 30 minutes of your house. You're going to forget something. I have a really type A personality. I like to plan things. I like to put in research. So I spent a month planning our first trip. It was not close to home, but we left the state. We went on a 3-state road trip and hit multiple national parks. And I essentially took every area and I mapped out anything that looked like it was accessible, stroller friendly. We carry him on our back sometimes in a kinder pack, kind of like a baby carrier, but they make bigger sizes. So short hikes that were like amazing and worth the view. And we didn't have it planned out where, because you can't do this with medical kids, like at 10 a.m. we're going here and at noon this is happening. That doesn't really work. So it was more, we're in this area for 3 days. These are the things in the area that we can do. So we don't get stuck going, where can we go? Where can he roll? Right? The trip went amazing. Off without a hitch. Nothing went wrong. This never happens. I don't know how. Everything was so smooth and we were absolutely hooked. He got to see all these national parks and we went hiking and we found so many places that were wheelchair friendly. But as we went everywhere, I didn't see anyone else with a wheelchair and I didn't see any kids like Robbie. And that made me so sad because some of these places were so accessible and no one knew about them. And then we got home and I'd spent over a month planning and I just kept looking at this whole binder that I made thinking, it's just going to go into a drawer and die. Like, no one's ever going to know about these places. So my husband and I talked and we actually had another appointment with our neurologist and we told her all about the trip with the Make-A-Wish camper that she helped us get. And I was like, I wish more families would know. And I don't know, like maybe I should start a blog or do something. And she was like, yes, do it.
Amazing.
I was like, okay, so at least it's more less awkward when I'm on social media and I reach out to these like full-time RVers and hikers and I'm like, what is in this area? Have you seen anything? Can you help me? Because that's how I found a lot of things that we could do, as I would find families that travel a lot and just ask them questions like, do you remember, did you have a stroller with you?
Right.
So we started Accessible Adventures and started sharing just on a really small level, just in case someone happened to be digging for the information, they would find it.
Yeah.
Something took off, a video hit 12 million people. All of a sudden we had this community and they were asking questions and wanted to know more things. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I guess when you put something on social media, it can go further.
Right.
So the whole idea changed. And then we were like, instead of people digging for it, what if we could find the people that didn't know that this was an option and be like, hey, you could still go on a vacation. You could still go to see national parks and you don't have to climb to the top of the peak and, be at Half Dome because that's where the pictures are. If you look up their social media, it's never something accessible. It's not a kid in a wheelchair or an elderly person, but there are options most places that you go.
That must be so freeing for people too, because even myself, like it's just around here because we live so rurally, it feels very daunting and overwhelming just to get outside for a day with Wesley and Hudson together. So just to know that there's this resource online, it opens the door for so much adventure and just like time outside with your family and feeling like everybody can be a part of it. It must be so incredible.
I think it's so hard for people that aren't like the planner, right? Like I just wanted to go on a trip and hit a town and just see things. And I'm not really good at putting things together. So that's kind of been my goal, is to say, you can go here and this is where you can eat and this is where you can stay. And here are the activities that you can do. And here are the companies that maybe they're not accessible, but they were inclusive and they adapted for us. And you're welcome here. And families just know, like, and have kind of an outline to say, okay, I know where to start. And I know if I go here, it's not going to be a bus. And everywhere we show up, there's going to be stairs. And because it's daunting and it's exhausting when you keep showing up places and they're not meant for you.
And so have you had a lot of companies or businesses reach out to you that are accessible and want to reach your audience, basically, to have you come and promote them?
Yeah. So it started with us just traveling and sharing things. And then we started to have tourism boards reach out and say, I saw that you went here and you shared in this way, and we've never shared that before. So I was wondering if you wanted to come in and partner with us and kind of highlight and map out all these things, and maybe here are some ideas, or you give us ideas. So that's what we do professionally now. It didn't start as a business. It kind of morphed into that through the years. But now we actually work with tourism boards and local companies and adaptive sports companies to say, let's help get this awareness out there and let's show everyone that your town wants them here. You want us here. You're being inclusive. People are going to show up and not get turned away. And like, we just went to a town and we went dog sledding, and it's something that I never thought that Robbie was going to do before. I would never know. How would you know that this one company was like, absolutely, we can make that work? Because most of the time you look on their website and you read through and it's like child must be over 5 years old, be able to sit on their own, all of
Yeah.
these things, because those are the typical rules. But a lot of companies are willing to adapt. So I think it's having the right contact and knowing who it is. And I feel so blessed that we're able to experience all these things with Robbie, but also to raise awareness for these companies so that more families are able to come and experience it too. Because at first it was, I just want Robbie to try everything and see everything and just experience life while he can. And then it turned into like, but what about all these other sweet little babies that are stuck at home and all their memories are therapy? Because that's how Robbie's life was for the first so many years. It was therapy and doctors and as much fun as I could try to make on the weekend, but it didn't feel like enough. And now looking back, he still has a ton of therapy. He does an intensive every year, but his life is so full of adventure and joy, more memories than typical kids do.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking that. So that was actually a question, how much therapy he does, because I feel a lot of guilt around like taking Wesley out of school and going on these adventures. I'm like, is it best for him to just be home in his familiar place and getting like therapists coming in and doing a bunch of intensives with him? Or is it better for us to be having these like really unique adventures with him as a family? So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
So I have done it every way that there is to do it. I've done it when he was young, right? Where they come every single week and this is our schedule and they're here 4 days a week. And then we took a break and we took a therapeutic break for 2 years. He had no therapy at all. And all the therapy was essentially what we were doing. And my strongest advice is to follow your child's lead. He was getting to a point in therapy that he was crying through sessions. He didn't want to do it. He kept just trying to lay down and I call it possum, right? And pretend like he was sleeping, disinterested, that we were like, how can we engage him again? So we started doing things outside. And all of a sudden, I want to stand and put weight in my legs because we're outside and there's something cool to look over on the other side. And I want to have better head control because I'm trying to sit up and look out while we're doing these things. So we did therapy on the road and did a ton of RV trips, and we put him in the water all the time, and he was growing strength. And as soon as we started to see new skills emerging, we were like, maybe it's time to try therapy, and maybe we'll do an intensive therapy versus therapy every week. And we'll see how that goes. So we did an intensive therapy at Napa. It's 3 weeks long. It's 4 hours every day. It is hard work. I was terrified that we were going to bring Robbie in and he was going to be like, absolutely not. Your kids understand more than you think that they do. So much more than I thought that he did. So I just kept talking to him every day and just explaining, we're here because you're so close and you want to walk so bad. And if they can help you, if you work at this, I think you can do it. I really think you can do it. And by the end of 3 weeks, he went from, he could take 2 or 3 steps. He's walking around our entire house now. He pops up in the middle of the floor and he can use an eye gaze. We've never had that opportunity before. So he was able to communicate with us and like reiterate the things that he likes. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is life changing. So then here we are in the same situation again. Do we wait? Do we do this once a year? Do I do this twice a year? I know families that do it 3 times a year. For me, that was too much. So we back to the drawing board. Like, what do we do? And we started with, we were going twice a week because we were like, he's so close to these other goals. And Robbie essentially without words told us absolutely not. He would just sit down when we got to therapy and be like, no, I'm not doing this.
Not interested.
So we took a break for a few weeks and then we went back to once a week. And we were like, what if we only came on Mondays and we did all of your therapy at one time? And that way you can still grow and it can still help you. And we'll take breaks. So anytime we have a trip planned, cancel therapy. If you're not feeling it today, cancel therapy. So if Robbie's having a rough seizure day, we're not coming. And our group has been so amazing about that. And he, all of a sudden, by week 2, he realized, oh, it's been a whole week and you brought me back. I'm trying again. So I think that watching your child and how they respond to their therapists and are they gaining skill? If you've been doing the same therapy for 3 years and they're not gaining anything from it, maybe take a therapeutic break for your own mental health, for their mental health, go outside, do other things, and you can do the same work that you've been watching them do, right? Like that's kind of what we did.
Yeah.
And this summer, we plan on taking like a whole therapeutic break. So he's going to be doing 1 intensive a year.
Okay.
Over summer, we won't be doing therapies really at all, at least for a month. All of our kids are getting breaks and we'll be traveling more and having fun and just focusing on that because I think everyone deserves breaks sometimes. But I think the answer is different for everyone. And you just really have to look for all of those, even if they're nonverbal, they will tell you.
Yeah.
Are they happy with this? Is this fulfilling to them? Do they understand why we're doing this? And kind of go from there.
Yeah. We put Wesley in an intensive a couple years ago and we haven't gone back because he just scream cried the whole time. Scream cried. And so he gets therapy at school. His therapists do go to school and do some stuff with him, and then they teach his EAs. And so they work with him daily, which is great. We don't do a ton at home. Just by the time he's home from school, it's like dinner time for bed, basically. And then, he goes in his standing frame quite often here at home. But yeah, there's a lot of guilt there, but also just hearing you explain how Robbie's time on his adventures kind of prepared him mentally for these therapies kind of makes me feel a little bit better because I do feel like it is really beneficial to his development.
I mean, think about every time you're out, right? And you're in a canoe and he's sitting up and the water's rocking underneath you and his body is compensating. He's not sitting still in a chair. He's not sitting in something that's fully supportive, like his wheelchair with lateral supports and all these things.
Right.
That is therapy. That's like an intensive therapy. So when we're going on this trip and they're outside every day and they're doing all of these things, that is so therapeutic. And also every time you experience something new, your brain is making new connections. Right. So the more new connections that you can make, the better that therapy is going to stick later. I'm just such a big fan of incorporating everything in fun ways. And we did an intensive with our youngest. She cried through DMI every day. It was so incredibly hard. She loved the other things that we did there, which was reassuring and kept us going. At the end of the 3 weeks, I do think it was worth it because she was dragging one foot and now she is not, and she's not tripping anymore. Would I continue to do DMI therapy with her weekly? Absolutely not. So I don't want her to have crying memories every single week for the rest of her life. So that's something that we are going to fine tune her skills maybe once a year with that, but it's not something I would have her show up for weekly because she's let us know that she hated it and she didn't want to do it. She let us know that doing a PT in clinic was awful. She hated it. So we were like, if this doesn't work for you, let's do it in a more fun way. So now her PT comes to our house and they can play and they can go outside and do things that are more functional for her. And she's accepting of it and thinks it's cool and is excited for it. So I think that just listening to them and adapting with them. And don't be afraid to try new things, because sometimes you're going to try it and you're going to go to an intensive and you're going to be like, oh, this was not it. They said no. Or I've heard people that were so excited and they tried something and they put their kid in the water for the first time and they were like, no.
Yeah.
So, but you won't know if you don't try.
Exactly.
You'll never know.
Sure. For sure. Yeah, with Wesley, even in the canoe, kind of as you mentioned, he moves a lot. So with his syndrome, it's just the kind of erratic movements, I guess. And so when he's in the canoe, though, or even when we're going for a walk, I do notice his body seems much more at ease and he is able to kind of make those visual connections. So he'll stare at the trees or the water, he'll reach for the water. And so just little things like that, it makes it all worth it. And it's doing something, It
is. Yeah. It's doing something so much bigger. So much bigger than what you realize. It does so much. It does so much good. And I think that also just him having all of those memories, right? Like I didn't just have school and therapy and doctors and hospitals. I had a joyful childhood, just like every other kid got to have. And I got to go outside and experience nature. Nature is so healing. That's a whole separate topic, right? Like,
yes.
Think about how healing it is for you and for your mental health. And as special needs parents, we need it more than anyone. And it's less accessible to us than it is to anyone. So if you can learn to adapt or find accessible ways to get outside, then by all means, for your own mental health, if not for theirs, it is important.
Yes, big time. And so now I want to get into your adventures. How many national parks has Robbie been to?
That's a good question. I think we're at 36.
Wow. And so for the Canadian who doesn't know exactly how many national parks you have, how many are there?
So there are 63 national parks and he's been to 36. So some of them are harder than others to get to, right? Because they're like the middle of nowhere, Alaska, or on an island somewhere.
Yeah.
but he's been to his fair share, and all of which he's got to with his RV.
Amazing. That's
Yeah, so
incredible.
he's been to 17 states, I believe, in his RV now, out of the 50 that we
Okay.
have in the US.
Okay. Wow. Incredible. And so this summer you're planning on exploring a few more states, I assume. You said you're taking a break from therapy.
We're sure gonna try. So I am due with baby number 4 July. So
Okay.
I am not allowed to travel as of June, is what they
Okay.
say. So the end of April, we're waiting to make sure that I still get the go ahead.
Hmm.
But our hope is to do one more big loop and hit 3 more national parks to knock off his list this year. So
Amazing.
we shall see, but it is a big goal of ours to kind of get one last big push in before we have
Hmm.
to maybe calm down for a little bit and stay local.
Yeah. I wanted to ask just because I struggled with this myself. After receiving a diagnosis for Robbie, did you have struggles deciding whether you wanted to have more kids?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is the level of support that you're receiving. So
Mm-hmm.
when we lived in Florida and TJ was working full time, and not only full time but constant overtime to,
Mm-hmm.
withhold all our finances for our family, we decided no, and we wanted a big family. So
Mm-hmm.
we waited over 7 years. We moved to Colorado, and he was able to be home as a caregiver for Robbie, and I
Mm-hmm.
work from home. So now that we were both in the house and we have just a whole different dynamic and level of support, we
Mm-hmm.
sat down and we were like, is it too late? Do we want to try this again? And we decided that we could totally do it. And part
Mm-hmm.
of that was like, we've done a ton of genetic testing. They've told us this is something that kind of spontaneously happened. They don't think it's something that we carry. So we were like, if worst case scenario, if something were to happen and we had another child and they had a disability, at least we're somewhere that we would receive the kind of support that we need to
Right.
thrive and to
Mm-hmm.
still be able to make it. And it wouldn't be one of us trying to be home with multiple kids with high needs by ourselves. So that's how we made the decision to have Taylor. And we tried for over a year. We finally had Taylor and everything was going great. Taylor does have level 3 autism. It's not genetic. She had an injury after birth, and that's kind of what caused a lot of what we see in her. Unfortunately, she does require a high level of care.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not something that was genetic. It's not something that was passed down.
Mm-hmm.
I am pregnant now. Am I terrified that something could happen? I guess mildly. Not as scared as I
Mm-hmm.
was when I was pregnant with Taylor, because she came out this perfect little beautiful healthy baby.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened that was out of my control. But I think that it's always a hard decision, and you really have to look at your own mental health and your support system and kind of make that decision from there. I feel like I'm never going to sleep again come July,
Right.
because my daughter
Yeah.
is up still 6 times a night, and we're gonna have a newborn that's up all the time. So we'll see how I'm functioning if you talk to me at the end of the year. Where this one was our first surprise.
Okay.
So I would not have likely decided to try again given the care needs that our kids have at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are other blessings that I think that, with Taylor's certain delays in like communication, I think having another little person around could really help her thrive. So maybe everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, we struggled with that decision too. We knew we wanted a bigger family, like 2 kids was kind of the idea, but yeah, decisions change obviously with how things go. So we're still actually kind of deciding if we want to have one more for many reasons. I'm curious if this ever played into your decision, but like for example, and this would never be the only reason why we would want to have another, but we think about when we're no longer around
For
and who's
sure.
going to be managing Wesley's care. Of course we have Hudson, but it feels like a lot to put on one person. Even like for example with my mom when she wasn't well, it was me and my sister together kind of bouncing off each other, so we kind of think it would be beneficial for all of us as a whole.
It was a
Yeah.
huge factor in deciding for trying for Taylor, to be honest.
Hmm.
Because we didn't want our oldest daughter to be making that decision really on her
Hmm.
own.
Yeah.
And it's not even, I mean, she's said repeatedly that she plans to have Robbie live with her forever. If something were to happen to us, whether she has care coming into the home and home health or she's doing it herself, is undecided, but she doesn't want him going anywhere else. She wants to be able to have him right with her. They have a really great relationship. We've repeatedly told her, that this is her decision to make, but whether or not you are their primary caregiver or you are in charge of making sure that they're receiving good care, like, she would be the one left to make decisions. And that feels very heavy. And I do think that having someone to call and to help so that you're not holding the weight of a decision would be so helpful. So that was an active thing that we thought about when we were thinking, should we have another one? And that was another reason that when we found out that we were pregnant with this one, we were like, man, that's hard. However, again, I do think that her having that support, and even if they're 11 years apart in age, by the time that you're adults, that's nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. Yeah, it makes a really big difference to have that support. So yeah, I was just kind of curious how that played into your decision. So I'm glad we're not the only ones. It does feel like it feels a little strange to make that huge of a life decision based on those factors, but it is the reality. And it wasn't anything that we were expecting, of course. Wesley's diagnosis came after he was born as well. So it was like not anything that we could have prepared for ahead of time. Now it's like, okay, well, let's try to make it so that he and Hudson have the most fulfilled life, because of course, there's also something to be said about having that sibling that you really can interact with in a certain way. Hudson loves Wesley to death and he loves to interact with him in the best way that he can. But I do think it would be nice for him to have another companion that he can really interact with in a different way, I guess. So yeah,
for sure. I mean, and I think that as parents, that's something that I feel responsible to make sure we have big feelings, right? There is grief that comes with having a child that you didn't expect to have these medical complexities and seizures and all of these things. So having open dialogue with your kids and letting them know it's okay to sometimes wake up and be like, man, I really wish my brother could talk to me. You don't have to feel guilt around that. That's an okay feeling. You can love and accept him fully and still wish that he could have that relationship with you. So I am a huge advocate for siblings as they grow older, having therapy sessions and getting to work through that and understand that emotion and that side of things, and having open dialogue and knowing that that is okay and that doesn't negate the acceptance or the love that you have for exactly how they are. Because those are big feelings for us as adults. So imagine these tiny little humans that are like, man, I just really wish that my brother could run and knock on my room and ask me to go jump on a trampoline, right? Like, and they see other kids that have that and they don't. And I think that acknowledging that is important in their journey. And I think that by doing that, that's also grown her relationship so much stronger with him and her just like level of acceptance and involvement, that she is very strongly an advocate for him. And when it snows, she's like, Robbie would want to go outside. Like, essentially, like, I know it's going to be hard for you versus just running me in the backyard, but he loves it and you're going to need to put in the work. Like, she's the first person to advocate for that for him and to be his voice. And I think that she forever will be, because of that bond that they have.
Totally. Yeah. And it's hard to remember, as an adult now, it's like, yeah, these things do bring these kids joy, like Hudson will do the same thing. He's like, Wesley wants to do this with us, and so it's like, okay, well, we're bringing Wes, I love that he wants him to be included, despite the added challenges, but it just means so much to me that he recognizes that. And he's a kid too. And he's like, well, Wesley's a kid and he wants to do the fun kid stuff that kids want to do, so it's such a special bond and I love to watch it develop. So it's really awesome. So what are some practical tips you have for parents who are new to accessible travel or are looking to start their own adventure journey with a child who has medical needs?
I think knowing how to find resources is really important. So some ways that I like to plan a trip: pick a general area that you want to go to. Typically, we do this around national parks, but it could just be around, like, I want to see the Smoky Mountains, right? It can start more broad and then you can define it down. And then look for accessible things to do in the area. Like, I will Google that. Also, something that you'll find more of, there are more mommy bloggers than adaptive adventure or accessible bloggers. So look up stroller friendly things to do in an area and you will find much more. Keep in mind that when you look up stroller friendly, it might be a paved path, but it has an incline. So that's why it's not listed as ADA accessible on like someone's website. So those are the first two things that I'll do. And then I will start to reach out to the tourism boards. Now I started reaching out to tourism boards long before I was working with them. They know all the companies in the area. Most of them have a good relationship with them. They know the hotels. So if you reach out and you're like, hey, we're coming to this area, and send them an email or a DM on social media, and I have a child with these needs and I was wondering what would be a good fit for us. If you know any things that are accessible, sometimes they have a guide on their website for accessible activities. If they don't yet, I promise I'm trying to get them to, because it's something that I feel so strongly about. Like, we shouldn't have to dig and ask an email. But these are great ways to do so. Also, there are more than just me online that are sharing accessible travel. So some of the others that I love, Curb Free with Corey Lee. He goes international. He lives more East Coast. Wonders Within Reach. She has a son with spina bifida. Corey is a wheelchair user himself. She also lives on the East Coast, but goes all over internationally and over the US. So where she's been, I might not have. Where I've been, she might not have. And they each have blogs. Amazing blogs where you can go to their website and you can type in a state and see what pops up. They have their own little search engines, as do I. That's super helpful when you have someone that's actually rolled there before to tell you where to go. And there are universal changing table maps that you can literally Google changingspaces.org, and you can look up anywhere with a full-size changing table that you can change your child. We share things on the Connected Parent site. So it's the connectedparent.net. And essentially it's a Yelp for special needs parents. So if a parent lives in an area, there are some more blank spots on a map where maybe they haven't found people that live there yet. There are other areas where you can tell that there are active users and they're adding so many things. We add things as we travel, and you can look up an area and then be like, these are the companies or the things that we can do. Inclusive playgrounds, anything that you can really imagine, from doctors to playgrounds and accessible changing tables, it's all there. So
amazing.
I'm trying to find resources that way. I get a lot of DMs, which I answer every single message that I receive. I know a lot of these other people that share online, they do that as well. So feel free to message and say, hey, have you been to this place? I might have blogged about it, or I know that one of these other people has, and I can send you their direction. Another thing that I look for is, if I'm going to Florida, I won't say, I want to go to Daytona Beach. I'm going to look up the most accessible beach in Florida, and then I'm going to plan my trip from there.
Right.
Or the first thing I'm going to look for is adaptive sports companies. So adaptive sports companies in Utah. And then, okay, in Park City, Utah, they have this company. In Colorado, we have so many. I know over 5 that are in the mountain towns. So before I just pick a town to visit, mountains, I'm going to look for adaptive sports companies and say, okay, well, they could help me. I don't have to know how to take my son paddleboarding. I don't have to know how to take him on a ropes course or how to take him skiing. I don't know how to do that, but they know how to do that. And I can book lessons with them and they will help me, and they help with the transfers and everything. So if it's overwhelming to try new things, find a company that specializes in that and then plan your trip around it.
Perfect. And so for myself with Paddle Like a Girl, I struggle to find ways to be more accessible for people who are using wheelchairs. Do you have any suggestions for a company like myself that is a recreational company that can become more accessible for folks?
Yeah, so a lot of it is having at least one canoe set up for accessibility. So what that looks like is having like the outriggers. I call them anti-tippers and they laugh at me, but that's essentially what they are. So for me to put Robbie without a ton of added supports, because he's 70 pounds, in a canoe, when we went with an adaptive sports company, they had these big outriggers on the back. So as he's leaning and he's touching the water and he's so excited, he is not tipping me. And we are not popping out. They also had these like inflatable pillows, right? So they put it all around him and then inflated it, and then he had some support. But if you were to tip out, you're not strapped into something where it's a safety risk. So that was really cool. I've seen people, and this might be something, just seeing if you have one in your area, or if you could partner with a park to get one that you usually go to, where they have accessible drop-ins. So basically there's a transfer seat that goes across, and then you can be able to transfer yourself into a paddleboard and then push down and it slides into the water to make things a little more accessible and adaptive. I think most of all is sharing, like, through your website and through your podcast. Like, maybe we don't have it all figured out yet, but we're willing to adapt. So if you contact me with your needs, then let's see if we can brainstorm and find a way to make it work.
Right.
And that's so important because so many companies, if I call, I get a teenager that's working a summer internship that's at the front desk, and I'm like, hey, could you guys accommodate? And they're like, no. But if you talk to the owner, they're like, absolutely, we definitely could. So if on their website there's not an accessibility page that says call and ask for Kim, right? Or then you're not getting the right contact to ask the right questions and let them know what your needs truly are. And there have been times where they're like, our insurance doesn't allow to put a car seat inside like this off-road vehicle.
Right.
So if they need a car seat, then they can't go. But we do have a 5-point harness that would shrink down to his size if he's the size of an average 10-year-old. So I think that we could make it work. So I think that just knowing who to contact is like a huge thing for companies that want to be more inclusive.
Okay. That's great. That's great advice. Thank you. And so what advice would you give to women in outdoor communities who want to support families with children who have special medical needs or disabilities?
I think women supporting women is huge, right? So sometimes just supporting moms in general and having events that are catered towards families that are more inclusive and saying, we're not afraid to include your kids, or having groups of moms that have special needs kids be able to go and say, hey, this experience is for you, and you can all kind of bond and work together and have those that community discussion while you're learning to do something and being outside in nature, whether it's just the moms or if they're able to bring their kids. It depends on what your company is able to accomplish with the kind of a recreation that you're doing, right? We've done a ton of adaptive recreation, so it really depends on what kind of equipment each child needs. My son has some stuff that doesn't work for his little best friends, and then he has stuff that does. So I think knowing that and just providing a supportive environment is more impactful than people realize.
Yeah, big time. So what is next for Accessible Adventures? You are due in July, so you're trying to get some big adventuring in before your due date. And then what, if you have anything planned after that?
I feel like so much of that is up in the air.
Okay. That's fair.
To see what we have the mental bandwidth for, because more than anything, my kids and motherhood comes first. So we are trying to kind of push an adventure in any way that we can before then. This year, my goal for Robbie was to really expand on his winter activities and not let the snow and the ice hold us back. We are originally from Florida, so I'm not exactly a ski girl. He got to go adaptive skiing. We got to do some snowshoeing for the first time ever and really try some new things outside, which he just absolutely loves. He loves the cold weather so much more than me. So he had a ball. We're really trying to push for one last spring trip in his camper, get some more national parks knocked off the list, and some more places on the map that we haven't been to. So my goal for Accessible Adventures, my long-term goal, is to hit every state and have at least one town or one really accessible location in every state, because some people can't afford to travel halfway across the country to hit Colorado or to go to California or to go to Florida. So I would love to be able to map things out locally for everyone to have something that was, drivable distance. I don't know that that's all going to happen this year. We may have to slow down for a bit until this little one is able to keep up. Our goal with all of our kids has been to adapt them early and start getting them outside and going on hikes when they're still pretty young. Increasing drive time. With Taylor, we can only go an hour at first. And then we really pushed for 2. And then now she'll sit in a car for 12 hours and she does really well. We've learned how to entertain her.
Oh, that's great.
Because that's the kind of travel that we typically do. We're road tripping and we're driving a long time. And Robbie's obsessed with being in the car all day like that. He loves it. He's got the windows down. He's got his hands out. He's got his feet out the window. I mean, people that are driving past us are like, that's a whole lot of people with that tiny camper getting pulled behind them and feet out the window. They're probably thinking we're absolutely nuts. So we'll be spending some time trying to adapt this little one to her new environment while she figures out that she's being born into a pretty adventurous family that doesn't like to sit at home.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully she's on board.
Yeah, I'm sure she will be. So how can people who are new to Accessible Adventures get involved? How can they support your mission?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on where you're coming from, right? So as a parent kind of joining our community, I think the biggest thing is trying to share these messages, because it can't be just me, right? It's our whole community that creates change. If I share something and we're like, we need more adaptive changing tables, my voice alone is not enough. So people resharing that and adding in their commentary and stitching videos, that's how things go viral. That's how they get across the right person's desks. I've had messages from architects that are working on like mapping out cities, and they're like, I didn't know about accessible changing tables and how easy it would be for me to add this in, and no one's ever told me, so I just want to say thanks, and this is going to be something that I add into every project and push back if they say no.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, it's just because something happened and our community ran with it, right? And
Yeah.
they got it, you guys got it in front of everybody else. Have that power. The internet has that power. So
Right.
as an advocate, you don't have to have your face on a screen. You don't have to share your story. You can be advocating by sharing other people's stories and elevating their voices in the background. That's so important for businesses and tourism boards, just learning how to become more inclusive. And I think so much of that is making sure that your websites have inclusive statements and accessibility information, and a straight contact that says, if it's not listed here, please contact this person with any questions and let us see how we can welcome you, and making sure that people know that they are welcome and accepted in your space. Tourism boards, I keep pushing. I'm like, if you have a social media page and your Instagram doesn't have a highlight bubble that talks about accessibility and inclusion, how would someone know that they could come see you? And I think as an industry, as business owners, we have to remember the large percentage of the world that has disabilities, that have mobility needs. It's not just these disabled children. Disabled children become disabled adults. Adults, you can be injured at any time. It's this minority that you can be a part of tomorrow. And I don't want you to be, but it takes one accident, one slip, one fall. It takes aging. And then all of a sudden that ramp is looking really nice. That extra room in a bathroom because you need a caregiver is looking really nice. So I think that advocating before you need it, so when you need it, it's there, is really important.
Yeah, it can happen to you or your loved one too, right? So people think they're so far removed from it, but like you said, it can happen at any time. Knock on wood, of course.
Of us are. And not only that, but when you have these new babies and you're out and they're asleep and they're in a stroller, I think we've all experienced the stairs and the I can't roll there, and you're like, oh man, I can't wait till they're out of this. But like, I think having that understanding that not everyone is going to grow out of that stage. I see so many videos online of mothers that are like, oh, we're finally to the age where I can sit back and read my book and not have to be staring and chasing the whole time. And not everyone has that luxury. And not everyone has that privilege. Not every child is going to grow out of their incontinence or eloping. And just having that level of acceptance and creating safe spaces, safe environments for everyone to feel welcome and included is really important.
Yeah. And you're just doing incredible work with your page and your website. Can you do this in Canada next? It is quite hard to find information, even with our provincial parks.
It's so high on TJ's bucket list. Like, he really wants to do an entire trip through Canada.
You should.
We just A, need the time, and B, like, I mean, his job, he cannot chart outside of the United States. So you're essentially taking unpaid time to go to another country and map things out. So my hope is to find more people and inspire more people that are in different areas like you.
Yeah. I was like, uh-oh.
I was just like, oh no, it's coming. No, that are doing that. So, we can't do it alone. And I think that it's so important that like we share all the resources that we can. When I was looking for track chairs in the United States, there wasn't one list anywhere. And I'm like, how do people find them? So like, I'm looking in every state, and then I'm Googling every town, and there's different ways. So like, we created a map for all of them, but like, we need bigger databases. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate for the connected parent, because you can add on all these locations. And that is something that if she hasn't yet, she is expanding to Canada. And that way, everything that you do find, you can add. And as you find other special needs families that are near you, or adults that have disabilities that are wheelchair users, they can add too. Another great app is Roll Mobility. You can add locations, pictures, and put how accessible something is. And they even have things as like, how heavy is a door? Were their bathrooms accessible? Things like that, because there are so many accessibility pieces that even when I started adding in information, I was like, oh, I wasn't looking for that because my son doesn't pull the door.
Right.
So as an able-bodied adult, I didn't even register or remember how heavy that door was. But you're right. If they don't have a switch and you show up, some of them you go to pull and you're like yanking back, and that's not possible if you're a wheelchair user.
Yeah, exactly.
So the ADA only covers this teeny tiny portion of what is actually needed for accessibility, and it's up to the rest of us to keep advocating to create the change in indoor and outdoor spaces.
Well, maybe I'll have to take that on. I don't do a lot of camping at like the provincial parks, and I would love to, because it is just a nice way to explore the province. And so I was thinking, I would love to be able to take Wesley, even like just myself and Wesley camping. I think that would be really fun, obviously at an accessible location. So maybe that's something I'll think about, is starting to just kind of start to explore locally and see what's there. It's hard because to me, he's still so little. So only now am I feeling like I'm really noticing the accessibility. Like even our own driveway is not accessible. Like I have to haul him up this hill every day for the bus. It's horrible. I'm like, when it's snow, I'm like, I've had enough of this snow. I can hardly push Wesley up the hill to the bus. It's ridiculous.
It's hard. And like people ask all the time, they're like, well, why don't you have a wheelchair van? And I'm like, because they're really expensive. Like, why do I not have an elevator and a lift in my home?
Yeah.
Because they're super expensive. And these are things that aren't covered by anything, right? So I don't think that people realize that a lift in a vehicle is like $30,000, and it's on top of getting a new vehicle that is going to be reliable. Otherwise, you spent $30,000 on an old vehicle that in 5 years may not be working.
We're currently there because I'm sick of lifting Wesley's 80-pound wheelchair in and out of the truck. So I'm like, Jim, we need a van. But then the problem is, just to get out of our driveway, we need all-wheel drive at minimum. They don't modify all-wheel drive van vehicles anymore. If they do, they don't have a seat in the middle next to where the wheelchair would go, which means Hudson would be all the way in the far back. And if you've ever met a toddler, they need 100 things passed to them throughout any given drive. So it's just like mind-boggling. So we just to see, we got a quote for exactly what we would need, which was like a lifted, 4x4 utility van with like seats that you can put in it. And it was $178,000 for just a manual ramp. And like, I'm just like, well, I guess we're not getting that.
We've been on the same journey and looking, and with the kind of traveling that we do in outdoor rec that we like we have to have at minimum all-wheel drive. At minimum. And it has to be lifted a bit. We're in the mountains, and down here there's snow. I'm not bottoming out a van.
And you blow out your suspension so quickly, right?
Right. So I'm like, that's not an option. We do travel in an RV. So it'd be great if it could pull. I mean, it's a small RV. It's under 5,000 pounds, but still to be able to pull something,
need to tow.
Or have room for our family is growing. So officially in July, we cannot all fit in one vehicle anymore with the vehicles that we have, and trying to find one that has the additional seating for 3 more children and a wheelchair and 2 adults is
impossible.
We're like $150,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that you used to be able to buy a car for that. I know you can't anymore, or buy a house for that. You can't buy a house for that anymore. But that's how I grew up. That was the cost of the house that I lived in.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
And that's not looking at our home that has steps to get into every single entrance, and stairs to get him up and down, and bathrooms that need to be remodeled. So that's a whole nother...
Yeah, it's scary to think about. Yeah, when they're just going to get bigger and bigger and heavier. And right now I can lift Wesley up and carry him from room to room. But, there's going to come a time where we're going to need a lift system in the bathroom, and he won't be able to get down to the basement without an elevator or some sort of system. Right. And so it's like, do we move? Are we going to find a house that works? Or, it's pretty scary. Yeah.
I don't know about where you live. Where we're from in Florida, everything's 1 story. You can get 2 stories, but typically you can get a larger floor plan 1-story house. That's what we had. It's much more easy to make that accessible. Here in Colorado, they just build up, man. They're 2-3 stories. Oh, it's 1 story with a basement. I'm like, that's not a 1-story house.
Yeah.
I have stairs.
Yeah.
There's only 2 bedrooms on the main floor, and like it's so hard to find. So then you're like, well, then you either have to custom build a house or buy a house that's on property.
Yeah.
And again, like we're looking for a home that's more accessible, or that we could make more accessible for Robbie. And that's over $1 million. So when people are like, well, why are you carrying him? Don't carry him down the stairs. I mean, even now I'm 22 weeks pregnant. How else does he get down?
Yeah.
I don't know how you think he's getting in and out of this car, or his wheelchair is getting in and out, because it's something that I just got to do. Like, and once I can't anymore, then we'll have a few months where TJ is going to be like absolutely dying physically, because the strain on one person's body with that many transfers a day is a lot. And there are things that are not covered. So it's lifelong planning. And making the right financial decisions from very, very early on. Like we have 2 very old vehicles right now, and we're waiting as long as we can. TJ's truck is an '07, but I'm like, I need that. When I get that van that costs me a house payment, I need it to last as long as possible.
Yeah, forever. Yeah,
forever.
Seriously.
So we're trying to wait, as long as we can and budget for things, but it's a lot. And I think that people don't realize, that disabled children become disabled adults, and so many things are not covered in this life that you really have to go out of your way for. But I have found that while we've done what we can, there are certain activities and certain locations that we were like, we have to do this while he's younger. So we have to kind of drop the fear or step into it rather, and go explore these things while we can still carry him, while I can still transfer him in and out of a raft to go whitewater rafting, while I can still put him on my back and hike to this peak that he's never going to see again, because that's not going to be completely accessible, even with adaptive equipment. As he gets bigger, that it just makes it very difficult. So we try to shove as much life into the days as we can, while also preparing financially for these large things that are coming. That's why I like RV travel and camping versus renting an accessible house everywhere we go. We couldn't go nearly as many places. And national parks, in our national park system, you have a free access pass for those with a disability. Your whole family gets in. So if he's in our vehicle, his paperwork was all submitted. He has his own free pass and it gets us in. So we're just paying for our camping, and we're spending time outside every day versus going to Disney. It works. It works for us. And then we can still budget and save for all of these adaptive, accessible things that he's going to need in his daily life in the future.
Yeah. Well, similar to you, we're trying to get in these big trips that we can do with Wesley while he's still little enough for us to transfer him in and out of the canoe and whatever it may be. Eventually it will just be campgrounds, because that's just going to be the reality. So, but yeah, just trying to get it all in now while he's little, because he'll be a disabled adult one day, and it won't be that easy.
But there's still things out there, and I was very nervous when we first started this. And now that we've found these adaptive sports companies and things like that, I feel so much better, because I can't do it by myself when he's 6'1" and he's 180 pounds, right? Like, how am I doing that? I'm not. But they do take disabled adults, and they still get to go skiing, and they still get to do trips. But you have, instead of just our parental unit, you have a team of adaptive sports specialists that are helping you. So maybe those adventures are more few and far between, and they're more limited on where you can go and what you can do, but they're definitely still out there. So I push for what we can. Like, if I'm not sure if that's something we're going to be able to do next year, I'm like, we should do it now. Go from there.
Well, that's incredible. Before I get into these rapid fire questions, so I have these surprise rapid fire questions for you. They're not like deep questions. They should just be kind of quick answers, just for fun. But before we get into that, where can people find you online and on socials?
Yeah, so we're on all the social media platforms, well, the big ones anyway. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as accessible.adventures. And then through our link tree, you can find our website, or it's accessibleadventures.net. And we do blog different towns there. So we'll try to go to an area and say, these are all of the things that you can do that are like within an hour of here. the companies that are willing to adapt for you, the restaurants, the places you can go to go grocery shopping that have an adaptive cart that your kid can fit in, anything that I can find. We kind of dump all the information in one space. I'm also a little better at Instagram, the way it's set up with highlights. I can put in a highlight bubble a specific town, and you can go through all of our stories from while we were there. There's a place that you can ask questions. So that's a good resource as well.
Okay. Awesome. I will be sure to link everything as well in the show description so that people can find you easily. All right, time for our fun questions. What is your favorite national park?
Ooh, that's hard. That's so hard. I really like Yellowstone. It's one of the only national parks we've been to twice. I would say it's a tie between Yellowstone and Rocky Mountain National Park, but I think that Yellowstone is so much more diverse. There's a lot of accessibility and there's boardwalks, and there's also so much you can see from your car. So many animals like bison just walking up right next to your car, and these huge elk that are bugling like 2 foot from your vehicle as you're going through. So when we're traveling with Robbie, because of his epilepsy, he does nap a lot during the day. And if you wake him, he has seizures. So when we have somewhere where we can go on like little scenic drives and it's still entertaining for the rest of us, or we can stop and one person can sit with him and other people can kind of jump in and out and look at things on the side of the road, and we kind of waste away time, and then he wakes up and go do something bigger that's fun for him. I think that's a perfect fit for our family. So we've made 2 trips to Yellowstone. Most national parks we do in a day, 2 days max. We have stayed at Yellowstone 7 days the first time and 3 days the second time. It is huge. I mean, it takes like 3 or 4 hours to drive from the bottom to the top. It's huge and so diverse. It's great.
Amazing. What is your favorite season to adventure?
I'm going to vote summer. I don't think my kids would agree.
Okay.
My oldest is obsessed with snow, and Robbie loves like that in between weather, but really his favorite thing in the world is water. So during the summer, we really try to plan adventures where he can be in and around water as much as possible. We go on hikes where like there's a waterfall that's going to be splashing him when we get to the end, or there's a lake that we can dip him in. And that's probably his favorite thing. I am originally from Florida. It's very hot weather. So I think that's where I'm the most acclimated to. So I personally prefer it. And there's just so many things that you can do. And that's usually why during the summer we'll like do a therapeutic break, cancel all the therapy, and just ride out.
Explore. Yeah. Okay. What is your most used piece of adaptive gear?
So I think that has changed. Say it was our Kinder Pack for the longest time. So a Kinder Pack is a backpack style carrier where you can put your child on your back and carry them. And just because anywhere that's not accessible, especially if you're thinking national parks, you know how heavy that wheelchair is that you take in and out of the back of your car? Yeah, ours too. So versus every stop pulling it out and putting it back in, it's easier just to strap him on our back and walk around for 10 minutes, see the views, and come back. He has gotten bigger. He's 70 pounds now, which means that carrying him is a little harder. He still loves it, so we do it for short distances. But I would say now in the outdoors, we probably use our Extreme Modus off-road wheelchair the most. It's got these big beefy tires and it can roll anywhere. It floats in water. You just keep a hand on it. So I can roll him into the water and roll him out versus trying to carry him and transfer, which is super hard with bigger kids. It rolls on snow. It rolls through sand, like really anywhere. Amazing. Yeah. And it's easy to just kind of pass off, you know, and trade off who's pushing and who's not. So I think that's probably our favorite, most used piece of equipment seasonally now.
Awesome. Okay. And what is one thing you do daily or even multiple times a day as a caregiver or medical mom that parents of neurotypical kids never have to consider?
This is long.
Yeah.
So I think when we're home, Robbie is line of sight. So because of his epilepsy, he has to be inside at all times. As I don't think people realize, even like running to the bathroom, going to the kitchen to prepare lunch really quickly while he's downstairs swinging on a swing. We have cameras in every room of our house. So I have them all set up. It's called Robbie Watch. And even if I walk into another room, I have to pull him up on my phone so that I can watch him while I'm in the other room for the 2 minutes that I am.
Yeah.
Versus just, I think the mental weight that takes versus you being able to just walk out and kind of listen for your kid that's 10 years old.
Yeah.
I know my 11-year-old daughter can be doing her own thing for 4 hours sometimes. And I'm like, where has she been?
Yeah.
But I know she's perfectly fine. She's in her room
Yeah.
drawing and she's doing a Lego. Like she's hanging
Yeah.
out. So I think that that's something that people don't realize
Yeah.
versus like obviously we're diaper changing and G-tube feeding and all of those
Yeah.
things that you might expect.
Yeah. Okay. And last, describe your son, Robbie, in 3 words.
Joyful, adventurous, stubborn.
Okay.
Stubborn in the best way. Stubborn in the I don't want to be done with this adventure. We're not going home. But also stubborn in the like nothing is going to stop me. So he was told he wouldn't walk and he is. He right now is trying to get up the stairs and he is so determined and so stubborn that I know he will because he's like I am going to do this and he won't stop until he can.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I feel like I could chat with you forever, but thank you for all the work that you're doing. And that resource is incredible for people who missed it. It's accessible.adventures on majority of the social media platforms and then accessibleadventures.net on the internet for the website. I'll have that in the link description. Thank you, Kristy, so much for chatting with me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to following along with the rest of your adventures.
Yeah, thank you for having me and helping elevate the voices in our community and all these locations. I think that no one of us can do it on our own. Like this is something that we're all in together, all of parents, adults with disabilities, anyone that owns a business. This is something that we all hold that weight together and we can't do it alone.
It's true. Yes. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.